My name is Skip Rutherford. I am Dean of the Clinton School of Public Service, and we are honored to have you today. I want to thank No Kid Hungry, Share Our Strength, and the Arkansas Hunger Relief Alliance for collaborating on this event and for the great work they are doing. And a special thanks to Nikolai DePippa for his leadership in bringing the best college speaker series in America to Little Rock, Arkansas. I want to give a personal shout out to Kathy Webb for her leadership. What a great job she does. And I want to give a personal shout out to a person in the governor's office that works diligently on this issue all the time, during work time, free time, and any time she can, and that's Harriet Phillips, and what a great job she does. You may not know that one of our graduates, Kim Caldwell, is with Share Our Strength in Washington, and we're very proud of the work Kim did with Harriet and others, and is now working with Share Our Strength, so we feel a very close connection to Share Our Strength. And I want to say, I don't know whether he's here or not, but we should acknowledge the work of Dr. Pat Casey, who has really brought the hunger issue to the forefront at Arkansas Children's and providing meals during the summer. What a great visionary and doctor he is. But, and one final shout out to someone who continues to represent this state so well, and her voice on this issue as many other issues, and I'm proud to say that she's going to deliver the commencement address at the Clinton School in May. Would you please welcome Arkansas's First Lady, Ginger Beebe. She says I make her nervous when I say that, but I'm just thrilled she's going to do it. We're pleased to welcome Jeff Bridges, Billy Shore, and others here to Arkansas, and one of the panelists that you will meet is Franklin Elementary School Principal Cynthia Collins, who taught my children in school. She is a great teacher. She is a great principal. We're also pleased to welcome our moderator today, Elise Edie, THV 11. Elise was not only is a great television personality and broadcaster, in addition to being first runner-up to Miss America, she is a devoted public and community servant and looks for the best in people. Please welcome your moderator, Elise Edie.
Skip, thank you so much for that introduction. We're so glad that all of you are here, and I'm honored to be serving as moderator today. We're here to talk about a solvable problem, childhood hunger in Arkansas. And joining us today is a very distinguished panel, and I'd like to introduce them now as they're taking the stage and getting seated. We begin with Arkansas Governor Mike Beebe. Since taking office, glad to have you here. Since taking office in 2007, Governor Beebe has made improving education and expanding Arkansas's economy his top priorities. Governor Beebe's education policies and initiative have garnered nationwide attention, and Arkansas now ranks 5th in overall K-12 education. Governor Beebe and his wife Ginger The two of them have worked together to improve children's health and literacy through the state and have been nationally recognized for their leadership in fighting childhood hunger. In 2010, he joined forces with Share Our Strength and the Arkansas Hunger Relief Alliance to launch No Kid Hungry. That's a campaign to end childhood hunger. And today, the governor will be addressing the importance and success of connecting kids to breakfast here in Arkansas. Once again, we're so glad that you're joining us, Governor Beebe. Thank you for being here today. Next is the founder and CEO of Share Our Strength. We have Bill Shore. He founded Share Our Strength in 1984 with his sister, Debbie. a $2,000 cash advance on a credit card. And since then, Share Our Strength has raised and invested millions in the fight against hunger and has won the support of national leaders in business, in government, in health and education, in sports, and also in entertainment. Today, Jeff will provide inspiration around the breakfast goal and how he's using his voice to challenge the nation to join us in that. We're so glad you're with us today, Bill. Thank you for being here. Our next panelist, Academy Award-winning actor, Jeff Bridges. Jeff, you might not know this, he's also a musician and a philanthropist as well, and for the past 30 years, he's been a very active anti-hunger activist and advocate for children all around the world. And today he's here in his role as the national spokesperson for Share Our Strength No Kid Hungry campaign. And Jeff will be talking about how he's challenging our nation's leaders to help connect 1 million kids to breakfast over the next 2 years. So welcome to Arkansas, Jeff. First time here. We're glad to have you. And we also have with us today Ms. Cynthia Collins. She's been principal of Franklin Elementary School for 5 years, and she's worked in the Little Rock School District for more than 20 years. She previously taught gifted and talented education and served as an assistant principal as well. Ms. Collins graduated from the University of Arkansas at Monticello and received a master's degree from the University of Arkansas at Little Rock in gifted and talented education. Ms. Collins joins us to talk about what happens in the classroom when kids don't eat and how breakfast in the classroom has had an effect on academic achievement. Thanks so much for being here, Ms. Cynthia Collins. Now at this time, let's welcome Governor Mike Beebe. He's going to join us and give us a look at childhood hunger here in Arkansas, and he'll be followed by Share Our Strength CEO Bill Shore.
You just want me to talk, is that it?
I want you to talk.
Sitting here?
That's right.
Okay.
You can actually wherever you want to be. You want to do it right there?
What I want to do first is suck up to my wife, if that's all right. I heard Skip give her some accolades, but let me tell you a quick story about Ginger. When she gets into something, she really does get into something. And between her and Harriet, who has been recognized in my office, they've made me and others do things that probably we might not otherwise have done. And, you know, I get some credit for all this stuff, but those two ladies really deserve the significant amount of credit, along with several others like Kathy Webb and others who have worked so hard. But an analogous story on a totally different issue will illustrate exactly the power of somebody like a First Lady. And I'd commend it to other governors and other folks across the country, and Billy and I have talked about this. When I was first in office, it might have been 07, might have been 08, Ginger took on an issue about children's mental health issues. And so she did a statewide listening tour that was that took several months, and she'd go to a few cities on each trip, and then a few days later, or maybe a week later, to a different set of cities. And during the course of that, it was twofold. The first part involved a lot of media because it was designed to enhance public awareness of the need for services, the lack of services, what services there were for children's mental health issues. And the second part of that was very private, with no media, and it was one-on-ones, usually with mothers, but not sometimes with dads, but with parents or folks in loco parentis to children with mental health issues. And they would look at Ginger and they would say, you are going to do something about this, aren't you? And she'd come back to the mansion and she'd look at me and she'd say, you are going to do something about this, aren't you? And I'd look at the head of Human Services and I'd say, you are going to do something about this. So the power of a First Lady is not to be minimized, or a First Man if the woman happens to be a governor. I think it's an essential role. What we've seen in Arkansas, and you can talk about that, Billy probably is the best one to talk about some of those statistics, but Arkansas has led the nation in increased number of meals for children, summer meals for children. And so while we're talking about breakfast in the classroom, while we're talking about breakfast after the bell, which is part of what Jeff's been all about, we can't forget what really needs to happen at other times. And one of the most critical times is summer. One quick anecdote, and I talked about this last night. It's not an anecdote. It's actually a statistic that was highlighted in the book, The Outliers. I don't know how many people are familiar with that book. But they measured elementary kids, second graders, third graders, fourth, fifth, sixth, and they divided them demographically by socioeconomic position, low income, middle income, and high income kids. And they tested them, and at the end of the school year in May, there was relatively little difference in the test scores among any of those demographic groups. Then they retested those same kids when they come back to school at the end of August, and there was a marked difference between low-income kids and the middle-income and upper-income kids. Either the lower-income kids were regressing or they weren't progressing, or combinations of both. A large part of that has to do with what the heck they were eating, not just what they were doing or what they were learning. And the most difficult time, we've got a captive audience when we do this in the schools, but it's more difficult in the summertime or on the weekends. And so while we strive, and while the focus of this certainly is breakfast in the classroom, we can't forget that there are other times throughout the year that are sometimes even more difficult to be able to deliver these services. Arkansas kids can't learn. American kids can't learn. The world's kids can't learn if they're hungry. It's a proven fact that the good nutrition, and particularly the breakfast, is a cornerstone for improving the performance of young people in schools. And by doing it the way Share Our Strength has done it, and Billy has done it in the breakfast in the classroom, and the way Jeff has tried to spread that word across the country, it removes stigma because everybody's doing it. You're not doing it in the cafeteria. You're not just singling out some kids. And peer pressure and all of those things are important factors. And my hat's off to Billy and to Share Our Strength, to Jeff, and to everybody who have recognized really the effectiveness of doing it in the fashion that they're doing it in the classrooms. It is much, much better than any other way that this has been delivered. So my hat's off.
Thank you so much, Governor. I've been with Governor Beebe enough to know that he often deflects the attention off of himself. But I could tell you, with No Kid Hungry and Share Our Strength working in 50 states in this country, there are not 49 other governors that have made the commitment that Governor Beebe has. In fact, there are not 5 other governors that have made the commitment that Governor Beebe has. So thank you. I'm going to stick with the governor's tradition of starting with a family story, and I think it sets the stage beautifully for what we're here to talk about today. I've got an 8-year-old son named Nate, and it's been his long-held fantasy that he and I would camp out in our living room and make a tent out of dish towels and blankets and T-shirts and things like that. And I said, you can do this any night you want, but it can't be on a school night. So we picked a Friday night. It was Martin Luther King weekend. We did it in our Washington apartment, and we had a little lantern, and I read him some stories, and we sang some songs till he fell asleep. And then, of course, he wanted to do what all kids want to do. He wanted to do it again the next night. And if you want to understand the full spectrum of opinion about how much fun this is, ask an 8-year-old and a 58-year-old, and you'll get some different views. So I said, no, Nate, I'm going to sleep in bed with Mom tonight. And we had this kind of tug of war over it. And he said, well, I want to camp out again. And I said, no, we said it was a one-night thing. And he said, well, I'm camping out without you then. And I said, fine, I'll be down the hall in bed with Mom, and it's maybe 10 yards. About 30 seconds later, he appears in our doorway, and he's got his blanket in one hand and his teddy bear in the other, and he says to me, who am I fooling? I wouldn't have lasted a minute out there on my own. Well, when I thought about what he said, I thought, really? Who would? What children can make it on their own? That's really what we're all about. That's why we're here today. That's what the No Kid Hungry campaign is all about. And that's what Sharing Strength is all about, that we've got the resources and we've got the skills and the talents to make sure that kids aren't on their own. And what we have found and been so inspired by here in Arkansas is the conviction that this is a solvable problem. Just give you the national scope and then to give you a sense of why we're so committed to and so inspired by what's happening in Arkansas. Nationally, we've got record levels of kids who are struggling and families who are struggling with hunger. We've got 47 million Americans on the SNAP food stamp program for the first time in history. Half of them are children. We've got 21 million kids who are eligible for a free or reduced price school lunch. And when we started doing this work, there were only 9 million getting breakfast, even though it's bought and paid for all 21 million. Entitlement program so small and that it's got so much bipartisan support that it was actually exempt from sequestration. Now there's about 11 million kids getting breakfast, but still a big gap. In Arkansas, 55% of the kids get breakfast. That's way better than the national average. And as the governor said this summer, the single biggest increase in summer meals, bigger than California, Texas, New York, any other state. And so when we have days, and as an organization, we committed to this notion of ending childhood hunger. We were working on hunger internationally. We were working on hunger across all demographics. We thought a lot about something that the writer Jonathan Kosel says, which is to pick battles that are big enough to matter but small enough to win. And when we asked ourselves, what is big enough to matter but small enough to win, we realized that kids in America who are hungry on a chronic basis, that is certainly big enough to matter, but it's also solvable. That is one that we could win. And we started meeting with governors, Governor O'Malley in Maryland, and literally the second governor we spoke with was Governor Beebe when he was in meeting in Washington, and he committed to this immediately. We know that the two factors that make the biggest difference on this issue are leadership and resources. So something as simple as, not always simple, but seemingly simple as moving breakfast from the cafeteria to the classroom, breakfast after the bell, which we're now committed to adding 1 million more kids around the country to these programs through breakfast after the bell, first 10 minutes of first period or grab and go breakfast in between. We've seen huge, huge results by doing this. But our strategy has been to invest in a few places where there is the leadership, where there are the local partners like Kathy Webb and Patty Barker, where there are the community engagement and the educators that can set a national example. So we're not only excited by what's been accomplished in Arkansas, but as Jeff Bridges will be able to tell you in a moment, Jeff is on his way to Montana next week to meet with 5 or 6 other governors that are having a regional meeting there. And we're going to be able to describe to them what's happened in Arkansas, and we know that they're going to want us to bring the same programs to their states. So again, I want to thank you, Governor. This wouldn't have happened without your leadership. First Lady Ginger Beebe, certainly so grateful for you as well. But really to a community of educators and teachers and volunteers and anti-hunger activists here who have said, we know that we can't have a strong America with weak kids. We can't have an America prepared to compete without kids that are prepared to learn from the minute they sit down. We can't have an America that looks to the future if we've got children and families looking to figure out where their next meal has come from. So we're seeing milestones that are really putting what you're doing here on the path to a truly historic achievement, and very, very grateful and inspired by your work. Thanks.
And we'll hear much more from Bill here in just a second. But Ms. Collins, you see how this works every day at your school. So tell us what it's like at Franklin Elementary and how you've seen your students reacting to having breakfast in the classroom.
Our students love breakfast in the classroom. They own this process. The students come in, the students pass out the placemats, they pass out the breakfasts, and then they sit, and it's a community building time for our students. And they learn about food, they learn about each other, they learn how to interact, and then they have a healthy meal. So some students pick up their meals, our 5th grade students pick up their meals and go, and our younger students have their meals delivered to the classroom. And so the students are excited about this time to eat together. It's very different from eating in the cafeteria. It's a different feel. Their teacher is there with them. And so they have these conversations that are meaningful, and then they get a healthy breakfast and a good start.
And I think, like everything else, Ms. Collins, it's a process in getting it all started. Talk about challenges that you faced in getting this in place and how you were able to overcome those.
I think our greatest fear of the new and the unknown, and how much time this would take from learning. You know, time is, we guard instructional time, and so everyone was concerned about what the time would do, and also about the mess that could be made from eating breakfast in the classroom.
Yeah.
And so those were the things we were challenged with, the teachers were worried most about, time and just how this is going to work. And so you never know how something is going to work on the front end. You have to get in there and do it. And when you do something, there's messiness in doing it. You're gonna make some starts and stops. But we have a great child nutrition. The Little Rock School District has a great child nutrition office who helped the schools, who led us and guided us and helped us work out those problems. Another challenge we had, particularly at Franklin, because I think every school is different, is how our school was built. We have levels. And so getting the breakfast delivered to the classroom was a challenge, and getting that figured out, and how our cafeteria staff could get the meals to the kids most efficiently. And we've worked through each one of those, and we tried several systems to get those things worked out, and we have. Breakfasts, they deliver the breakfasts in their bags to each classroom. They're there when the kids get there in the morning, and kids love it.
And you actually had a chance today, Jeff, to visit one of our schools. I believe you went to Stevens.
Yes.
Is that right? What'd you think? Did you have a chance to see this in action?
It was, am I on? Yeah, it was so inspiring, so terrific. The kids themselves, to see how much they enjoyed, as you were saying, you know, enjoying eating together and learning about the different food groups. And, you know, school is all about education. And one of the most important things to educate is your palate, you know. Obesity is really the flip side of hunger, and a lot of that is due to not training your palate to enjoy certain kinds of foods. If you get used to eating, you know, pizza pockets, or, you know, stuff that's not really good for you, that's what you're going to eat when that's what's going to feel good to eat when you're an adult. But if you learn about strawberries and, you know, all these little kids, you know, we played a little game like, what's your favorite, you know, vegetable and fruit? And they were all excited about sharing this and different combinations that they like to eat together. This is, you know, so important. And also, when Billy was telling his story about his little kid, sometimes I feel like a little kid, you know, in dealing with this hunger issue. I've been working in the hunger issue for about over 30 years now, and sometimes it kind of feels lonely because it's sort of a, I don't know, kind of an unsexy issue, you know. It's embarrassing for kids who are struggling with hunger, and it's embarrassing for those of us who are not struggling to admit that we live in a country where this is allowed to happen, where, you know, 1 in 5 kids live in families that don't have adequate food, you know. And so it was wonderful to be there at Stevens Elementary School, and it made me feel like, oh, we're not alone. We've got a lot of really committed, excited people, and that fueled my excitement so much. One of the things I love about the Share Our Strength organization is just its title, you know, Share Our Strength. And we each have a particular strength that we can lead to this issue. One of my heroes is Buckminster Fuller. I don't know if you guys are aware of him. You know, probably his most famous invention is the geodesic dome, but one of his key words, I think it's actually on his gravestone, it says, call me trim tab. And I don't know if you guys know what a trim tab is, but it's he talks about these big ocean liners, you know, tankers and stuff, and that the engineers found that just a simple rudder on there, it took too much energy to turn the rudder, to turn the ship. So they came up with a very simple plan called a trim tab. It's a little rudder on the rudder, and that little rudder turns the big rudder, and the big rudder turns the ship. And Bucky says, that's the power of the individual. We all have that power to turn the big ship. We're all attached to, people who might be more powerful than us, who have more influence than us. And that's what Share Our Strength is all about. And that's what's exciting, to be here with you guys, to be here with all you trim tabs. That we're gonna turn this thing around.
Just to follow up on that, Jeff, you have such an incredible platform. I mean, you're a celebrity in every sense of the word, but for the rest of us, what's your advice to us? What can we do to help with childhood hunger? Of course, it might be on a smaller scale than what you're able to do, but what's your advice for us on what we're able to do to help?
Yeah, I remember when I first became aware of world hunger and the problem of hunger, and the fact that it wasn't a matter of not having enough food or enough money or even not knowing how. All those things were in place, but it was creating the political will. And of course, our politicians, they represent us, and so it was a matter of like looking inside myself and saying, well, what am I willing to do? Now that I know the facts, am I just going to go kind of back to sleep, back to being ignorant, or am I going to really think about what am I willing to do? And that's kind of a tricky question if you ask it truthfully to yourself. When I ask myself that question, I say, well, what are my strengths? What do I have to give? I have a certain amount of celebrity. I deal with the media, often. I could spread the word, And so I helped create an organization called the End Hunger Network, made up of a bunch of like-minded guys, and we did that. But I think I would recommend that people just look inside themselves and think, what are my strengths? What might I do? A good way that might stimulate your answer to that question would be to go to nokidhungry.org, our website, and if you peruse that website, you'll come upon different things that might trigger that response to that question. One thing I think it's a really cool a thing that we've got on the website. If you go to now help me with this, Bill. Let me work on it because I'm exercising my mind on this. As an actor, you're supposed to remember your lines. Crowd, sourcing, map. Cool so far? Crowd, sourcing, map for breakfast after the bell. Pretty cool. Bingo. So if you go to that section of the site and you type in your area code, you'll come up with all the schools in your area and the schools that are participating in the breakfast after the bell program and those that aren't. And it'll give you ways to communicate with all those schools so you can congratulate all the schools that are participating in the program and inspire the schools that aren't to get with the program. And so that's something an individual can do.
You mentioned again that website, nokidhungry.org, if you're wanting to go somewhere and just find out more ways that you can help too. And Governor Beebe, Bill mentioned towards the beginning that you're maybe one of like 5 governors that have really done something about this and really stepped up. So what would your advice be to other governors to try and make sure that we get legislation or that they get legislation to change these things in their states too?
Listen to their spouse.
That's good advice.
Now, all governors are faced with problem solving, and some of those problems are chronic and really are across the board, whether it's in education or economic development or environmental issues or healthcare issues. But then over and above that, there are causes for which a governor either runs for office or, in my case, I didn't run on this platform, but once you get in there, you see that it has an interconnection with some of those chronic issues that we face. And I've always said that the number one obligation of state government is the education of our people, from pre-K to the end of life and everything in between, higher ed, K through 12, et cetera. And if you recognize and realize the link, the correlation between fighting hunger, particularly hunger in the morning, when the minds need to be alert, and the educational end result, if you recognize that connection, then it becomes easier for you to be able to embrace what we're talking about. In this case, breakfast in the classroom. If you can extend that to what I mentioned earlier about what happens in the summertime, particularly to kids who are hungry, kids from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, then you realize that that regression need not occur, and they can start the next year at an even better pace. So I think what all of us should do, and what your colleagues across the country in their respective states should do, is come to the realization of the correlation between education, which I think most would agree is their top priority as well, and the ability to fight childhood hunger. If you recognize that connection, then I think it'll be an easier job for governors to be able to embrace in varying degrees efforts here. Now, I mean, government doesn't do this by themselves. Of course, the federal government has programs, the state has programs, but you can't argue strongly enough for what it really means with the private sector to be involved. And what we've got in Arkansas is a tremendous private sector corporate support. I mean, our Hunger Alliance folks sitting down here can tell you about the Tysons and the Walmarts and the Krogers and all of the various private sector partners who, not necessarily directly with breakfast in the classroom, but with hunger across the board, contribute so much of their treasure, if you will, to helping this. Now, as I think Jeff mentioned this, I know Billy has talked about it before, we got plenty of food. And ultimately, when you get people stirred up, you got plenty of resources. One of our biggest challenges is the appropriate dissemination of that food, the logistics of getting that food to the right place at the right time in a fashion and in a manner that it's consumed. So that requires a whole lot of help outside the normal channels. I can't do that. State government really can't do that. Billy can't do that. Jeff can't do that. You can't do that. It has to be a conglomeration of other folks from different walks of life. And then the ability to be able to disseminate even outside the schools in the summer, whether it's community centers or churches or whatever it might be. So there's plenty of work, and there's a place for virtually everybody, corporate, individual, public, non-public entities, to be able to contribute to this. And if the other governors would just take it one step at a time, it's not an insurmountable problem. And if they truly will understand the correlation between improving the quality of educational outcomes and attacking childhood hunger, I think it's an easier sell.
Just one thing I might add is that although Arkansas has been very progressive, more than most states, including a legislative program called Arkansas Meals for Achievement, which creates additional resources for schools to make this transition. It doesn't always require legislation. So as you were just saying, there are lots of governors who've done this without legislation and just by working with their school superintendents, using the bully pulpit, providing other incentives for schools to do that, and as you say, engaging the private sector. Governor Beebe had the opportunity a little earlier to meet with got about a dozen CEOs from around the country who are here today, right here at our front table, who have also been helping us spread the word about what's going on in Arkansas to other communities, helping us raise a tremendous amount of resources to do that. So can't overstate how important the private sector is in what should be a public-private partnership. In an ideal world, you would have the government, the private sector, and the nonprofit sector working together. I think that's what we pulled off here, and that's why you got such a great outcome.
Well, Governor Beebe mentioned a little bit earlier that it takes a lot of people to make this happen, and no doubt a very important group of people who are living this every single day are our teachers. Ms. Collins, what's been the feedback that you've gotten from your teachers at Franklin? What have they said about this?
At first, it was a challenge. It was a tough sell for some of our teachers to really get this and understand it. But when they saw how quickly the kids could do this, that this wasn't a long, drawn-out process, and when they saw that, yes, you had a few things to happen, but you worked through them, they're all very positive because they don't have to send kids to the nurse or they don't have to send kids to the office because they have a tummy ache. We rarely see kids who have a tummy ache anymore. They come and say, I have a stomach ache. Well, it's really a stomach ache because they're hungry. And so teachers aren't having to look at kids who are hungry, and if they can't find anything, not give it to them, or try to find someone in the building who has something to give them. So I think that's one of the things that they're most excited about, is that they know children had breakfast because they had a chance to see it. They had a chance to have it with them.
Jeff, let's come back down here to you. This is something I'm sure that a lot of us have wondered about. When did the issue of childhood hunger become important to you? Why did you decide to get involved in this, of all of the issues?
Well, as I was saying, I got involved with the hunger issue originally to deal with world hunger. But then this was about in '83, and then around '85, a lot of reports were coming out that was saying that there was a hunger epidemic in our own country here, and they're looking at it as a health issue, and how how serious the condition was, and how a whole generation of kids are going to grow up suffering from the disease of hunger, and that it's a man-made disease. It's because of us that we can turn this thing around. And it was right around the time when ketchup was being labeled as a vegetable, and a lot of programs weren't being supported. And I said, well, we got to we can't be telling other countries how to do it when our own country can't handle hunger. So we focused here in America.
I think the most profound question I can think to follow up with that, what did you have for breakfast?
Oh, very good. Well, today I had some oatmeal. I had some fruit.
Balanced.
Normally, my wife, who, like the governor and Billy, she's everything to me, and she's makes me a wonderful green drink with spirulina and all kinds of fancy protein powders and everything. And
you're blessed.
So yes, I am.
So you're getting that breakfast in.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, what I think we can do right now is take questions from those of you in our audience. If there's anything that you would like to ask, maybe we didn't touch on it today. I don't know if we have mics out there. Looking. Okay, we do. I think there's a question. Just raise your hand. We have a question right up here in the front.
I just want to know, wonder, what do the meals at school consist of, and do you vary them? And could you give us a little idea of the logistics of getting them to the classroom from the cafeteria?
They have things that they could eat with their hands. They're quick things. They'll have like little pancakes in packages. They have yogurt. They have cheese, fruit, milk, juice, little rolls. So they have things that are easy that they could eat with their hands usually. And it's very quick. The cafeteria staff prepares it. They have it in bags. So when they get to the classroom, each student has their individual bag to use to have their meal in their individual bag. Our older students have the opportunity to choose. They're making selections about what they want to have for breakfast when they go through the line. They go through kiosk style.
We visited a school, where was it, Billy, that had that great innovative gardening kind of program. What was that? It was a charter school. Yeah. Oh. Yeah, they really were very creative, and actually, I don't know, I guess you can say it, they took that government money and they went out and bought gardening materials and stuff and started to, teach kids about gardening. So, it's kind of hard to believe, but I've been around some kids who say, why is that carrot in the ground? I don't understand. They don't really know, about how vegetables grow. So it's a lot of different creative ways to do it. I think each community has different answers to that question.
All right, and now we have another question from the audience.
Governor Beebe, you are the hunger governor. Congratulations. And you kind of answered the question about why hunger a little bit ago in a series of your answers, but I think it'd be interesting to learn a little bit more about why the No Kid Hungry program in particular. Thank you.
Well, kind of funny you said I'm the hunger governor. Yeah, not long ago, the Surgeon General and Director of Human Services they were in my office, and they said, yeah, you know, you ran on this education/economic development correlation, and you've been known as the education economic development governor. I think you're going to be the healthcare governor. And now I'm the hunger governor. So you know, Billy impressed me with what they were doing. When Billy and I talked, they impressed me. And then Harriet Phillips in our office became deeply engaged in this issue. And you know, it's not an overstatement to talk about how Ginger is so involved in all sorts of women's and children's issues. And so the combination of all those things, I think, just coalesced in a way that it became kind of a tidal wave. You know, how do you say no to that kind of force? And what I really bought into, over and above the humanitarian idea of how can the richest country in the world have kids that are hungry, and how is that something any of us can even tolerate? I added to that humanitarian aspect of it, that education component. And you know, we've kicked the devil out of the whole country. You're talking about O'Malley. O'Malley, Maryland's first in the country of the 50 states in the District of Columbia in rankings for K through 12, and we're only 5th. It's a long way from 40-something, but 5th's not good enough. And I told O'Malley we were coming after him. And one of the ways that we help improve scores, it seems to me, is for our kids to be able to concentrate and to be able to perform academically. And I'd like to know if you've seen a correlation between improved scores and improvement in the academic work our kids are doing, and the breakfast in the classroom issue, because I truly believe that connection is the second most important reason to be doing this, over and above the humanitarian reason that kids just shouldn't be hungry.
I think there is a connection. You know, it's hard to tease out exactly what the impact is, but you think about how you feel when you haven't eaten and how you're not able to focus. And you think about a child who hasn't eaten, and then we are expecting them to follow along with us and do those things. At Franklin, we have seen an increase in our test scores. In the last 3 years, our literacy test scores have increased by 29%, and our math test scores have increased by 13%. I think that it has something to do with it. There are lots of other factors that are working, that are at play together, but of course it has to impact how students feel when they come in that classroom and after they eat, whether or not they're ready to work and get busy and focus on their classroom assignments, and whether or not their behavior is such that they can focus. I think all of that has something to do with that.
It reminds me of the Snickers commercial when they say, you know, you're not you when you're hungry. And you're exactly right when you say that. You know, how can we expect our kids to be able to focus, you know, the same way that we're not able to too? So that's a good point that you made, Ms. Collins. I think that we should have time to take a couple more questions from the audience.
Yeah, hi. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like Congress is systematically cutting back on the food aid program. Other than the obvious, what is being done in the present moment?
Well, it's a great question. Fortunately, there were some cuts to the food stamp program over the last few months that many governments have been able to reverse. It was kind of a complicated program, but there was a caveat for government to be able to reverse it. The important thing, I think, in terms of what we're talking about today, because this applies to children, is these programs have had so much bipartisan support that they've really been protected. And Democrats and Republicans going back as far as Georgia Governor Bob Dole, who worked very closely on these, even though they were, you know, kind of bitter political rivals on a lot of issues. They were always together on school breakfast and school lunch and school nutrition programs. And so they have been, by and large, protected. There will be a reauthorization of these programs in 2015. that would be very important. But the big opportunity here is because these programs exist in a climate where a lot of other things are going away for kids, a lot of other budget cuts are impacting kids. Our belief is that as if there's this oasis of kind of protected turf around school breakfast and school lunch and summer meals that's funded and it's not threatened, which is the case, that we ought to try to enroll and drive as many kids into that as possible so that at least that safety net is maintained. And it's the kind of thing that, I think as Jeff was saying, you know, not a sexy issue, not a water cooler conversation, not always part of the national conversation. So to the degree that elected officials hear from members in this audience, their constituents, citizens, that these are important issues, it really impacts that climate.
Hi. Jeff, a few minutes ago you mentioned your breakfast. As a fitness specialist, we know for a fact eating correctly and exercising go hand in hand. Can you tell us a little bit about your fitness regimen?
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad she didn't ask me that question.
Being an actor, a lot of it depends on what movie I'm going to do. You know, if I'm playing some kind of alcoholic fat guy, then I got I got to eat that pint of ice cream. But I'm looking for a nice fit part right now because I kind of feel like like to get in shape. I like to hike. I live in kind of a hilly area, and we take walks with our dogs and stuff like that. Surf. I'm an old surfer. I like to do that.
Hope you have a chance to hike Pinnacle while you're here.
No,
Sounds like something you'd enjoy.
Yeah.
I think you would. All right.
We're a group of students from ASU Beebe, and my question for you is, how do we close the gap from higher education to public local learning facilities? How do we spread this message to our local communities?
Well, don't run away from her, because I may need a clarification on her question. Close the gap in what way? Educationally, or what are you talking about?
And implementing this in our local schools.
Local schools as opposed to colleges?
And educational facilities for children.
Okay. Well, closing the gap, I suppose, means that demographically we look at who's participating and who's not participating, and then try to instill in those folks who are not participating the actual experiences from the others. Let me give you an example. I don't remember whether it was Billy or Jeff told me before we got on stage that they'd had a gathering this morning with, 40 or 50 school superintendents from around the state. And some of those superintendents were actually testifying, giving testimonials, if you will, about the success that they'd seen in their respective school districts. It seems to me that one way to close the gap is for their peers to try to convince their colleagues about the success of this program. So I would imagine if we could get our superintendents and or our principals who have had the actual experience communicating with their colleagues across the state in those areas where they're not providing breakfast in the classroom, that by itself could probably be the most important factor to close that gap and fill in that space for those schools that aren't doing it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that meeting this morning was very important. Yogi Berra once said that the key to managing effectively is to keep those who hate you away from those who haven't made up their minds yet. This morning we did the opposite, is we took those who loved school breakfast in the classroom and we had them connected in the same room with superintendents who hadn't made up their minds yet. And I think it was very powerful for the one group to hear from the other. And that's our strategy as we go district by district, school district around the country.
One thing comes to my mind, here we got Governor Beebe, who's doing such a great job, and we've had such success in this state and a couple of other states. But there's a lot of work to still be done, and the way to close that gap, I had the privilege of doing a movie that was based on a book written by one of your guys, Charles Portis. So the way to close the gap, true grit. That's how you do it. And we've got it here. I can feel it right here, and that gives me hope that we're going to turn this thing around.
I like that. All right, we'll finish with our final question from the audience.
Governor Beebe and other distinguished members of the panel, as the senior pastor of a church here in Central Little Rock, we understand that hunger is a spiritual issue. I heard you earlier saying we need to combine these resources. Tell me, with summer being 3 months away, how do local churches partner with local government, and what resources can we provide to help get this thing underway?
Kathy, where are you? Stand up, Kathy. Stand up more, Kathy. First of all, Pastor, thank you for, and that's called lighting a fire right there. You were talking about, Jeff, getting people fired up and feeling the energy in the audience. That's an example of what can come from this. And Kathy's going to answer your question, Pastor.
And it's a great question. We need people to sign up immediately because there is a deadline for signing up. The Alliance number is 501-399-9999.
That ought to be easy.
So it's a lot of nines. So, and please call us.
Say that again,
Yeah,
Kathy.
one more time, Ms. Kathy.
501-399-9999. And we work with DHS and the Department of Education and the Health Department. And if you call us this week, we'll get you all fixed up. Thank you.
Again, thank you so much to our distinguished panel, Governor Beebe, Bill Shore, Jeff Bridges, Cynthia Collins. We really do appreciate you taking the time to come here today. Wonderful job. Thank you again.